All right, so we are live. We are live, and I am super excited this evening to have an interview with someone who is known as the queen of her genre. So, this is going to be a good conversation. So, those of you who are book lovers, especially if you love the horror genre, come on in the room. Share it with your friends who enjoy as well, and we'll go ahead and get started here in a few moments. For those of you who don't know me, I am Marcy Thomas. I am the founder of Brown Girl Collective and also the BGC Book Club, which has been around since April of last year. So we are about like 18 months old now and just really excited about all the wonderful authors that we've had a chance to talk to. And tonight we're doing something different because this is our first author in the horror genre. So we're looking forward to that. So as you're joining the room, if you don't mind dropping in and letting us know where you're joining us from, just so we can say hello and know who all is here, that would be wonderful. And as I said, share it out, or if you're watching it on a replay, please drop replay so that we know that you got a chance to watch. So one of the things I'm not going to do is keep you long because I know everybody's busy getting ready for the holiday next week. Got a lot going on. So without any further delay, I'm going to go ahead and introduce our guest for the evening. Tananarive Due is an award-winning author who teaches Black horror and Afrofuturism at UCLA. She is an executive producer on Shudder's groundbreaking documentary, Horror Noir, A History of Black Horror. She and her husband collaborator Stephen Barnes wrote A Small Town for season 2 of The Twilight Zone on CBS All Access. A leading voice in Black speculative fiction for more than 20 years, Due has won an American Book Award, an NAACP Image Award, and a British Fantasy Award. And her writing has been included in Best of the Year anthologies. Her books include Ghost Summer Stories, My Soul to Keep, and The Good House. She and her late mother, civil rights activist Patricia Stephens Due, co-authored Freedom in the Family, a mother-daughter memoir of the fight for civil rights. Once again, she is married to author Stephen Barnes, with whom she collaborates on screenplays, with whom she also collaborated. If you have read any of the Tennyson Hardwick series of mystery novels, she collaborated with her husband on that as well. And they currently live with their son and their 2 cats in the California area. So without any further delay, here is Tananarive Due.
Oh, without further ado.
Absolutely. So welcome, and here's the book.
Oh, thank you, my baby. That's my first. Copy. It's new and it's my first, so it's very special.
Absolutely. So thank you for joining us, and just welcome. As I mentioned to you before we came on, there are a lot of people who are excited to hear that you were going to be here with us. So I do consider it an honor to have you here.
Oh, well, thank you.
Yes. So, I mean, you have had quite a storied career in writing speculative fiction and just in writing overall. So, tell us a little bit about what drew you to this particular genre.
Well, I feel like the genre found me, really. My late mother, you mentioned Patricia Stephens Due, was a civil rights activist, but she was also a horror fan. Mm-hmm. And I have come to understand there's probably a relationship between those two things. That was not just a coincidence or like a quirky, she's a civil rights activist who's been subjected to state violence and tear gas and jail, who happens to love horror. I think it was more because she had been subjected to state violence and tear gas and jail that she developed a love for horror. And I think that traumatized people do tend to gravitate more toward horror. And even though I wasn't traumatized, I was her daughter, and she was watching all these old horror movies, and I just kind of got hooked. It was fun to me, Frankenstein and the Mummy and Dracula. She introduced me to Stephen King. The Shining, I think, was my first. The Stand. And as I was searching for my voice, especially when I was younger, science fiction and horror stories came to me very naturally.
Well, that's very interesting. As you mentioned that, your mom with her experiences and, a lot of things I've heard even recently with some of the things that are showing up in the genre that people look at as like, well, hey, you know, as Black people, some of these things are just a part of our lives, you know.
It's a
So
Tuesday. It's a Tuesday.
absolutely, exactly, exactly. So it's good to see that there are those who can take some of these stories, and now, as in this book that we'll be talking about, that you know people are taking their power back. It's not always just the Black person who's in the film or in the story who's going to get
Yes,
killed, and you know, and then we move
exactly.
on. You know, things being told from a totally different perspective. So you know, so that is really great. Now, one of the things I'm reading, actually, in the introduction to this book, you talked about one of the things that inspired you was trying to figure out how to find your voice, and that even though you might have been reading things or even watching movies in the genre, that your voice wasn't included.
No, I about had written myself out. You know, that's why I made the distinction when I was younger. Writing
Mm-hmm.
about science fiction and horror came easily to me. But even as I got older, writing Black characters was not coming easily to me.
Hmm.
It got educated out of me by the time I was in college, graduate school. All of the so-called canon, as they call it, you know, all
Hmm.
those texts that all the English majors have to read, are often white males or maybe white women if they want to mix it up. But especially back when I was in college, which was a long time ago, it was not the norm like
Hmm.
people do today to make sure they have a diverse
Right.
pedagogy and syllabus. It's just like, no, it's like the same writers, William Faulkner, and I, you know, and I grew to love those writers. I said it was Hemingway and Faulkner
Hmm.
and James Joyce and you know all that kind of, which is great, and I learned a great appreciation for that. But I think accidentally, let's say, the very picture of what a story was in my mind did not include anyone who looked like me, and did not
Hmm.
include genre, did not include
Right.
the elements of science fiction or horror. And to be honest, because my parents were civil rights activists. My father is still living; he's 87.
Oh, yeah. It's a
Yeah,
blessing.
but both of them in the Florida Civil Rights Hall of Fame. My mom posthumously, but I'd always had that awareness that they were respected. Like in college, I could open a textbook in a history
Mm.
class and see my mom's name in the index, right?
Wow.
So yeah, right. So I felt like I had something to live up to, and my fear was that if I wrote horror, I would not be respected because I could see the reactions of my classmates if I brought up Stephen King
Mm.
in class, or, you know, it's just like, oh, I see, they don't respect that. So I really had to work to find my voice, Marcy. It was a journey. You know, I was still writing epiphany stories, you know, like stories where a character makes a gentle realization at the end, you know.
Mhm. Mhm.
Up until the moment I got the idea for the Between, I think the most recent work I was doing was those stories with white characters. And then all of a sudden, Hurricane Andrew hit
Right.
1992.
Mhm.
And I guess it was just a wake up call. And I had read Mama Day by Gloria Naylor. Thank goodness. That was a role model. I had not discovered Sister Octavia Butler yet, but I would before I wrote My Soul to Keep. But by the time I opened my mind to it and realized I could have internal permission to
Mhm.
write Blackness, Black women, I hadn't gotten to Black women when I did The Between. It's a Black male protagonist.
Right. It is. It is. But
I was
that's
kind of working my way home. You know, I wasn't quite home yet, but I was working my way back toward home. But just that, it was the internal permission to do it.
absolutely, and I can really appreciate that. Like you talking about growing up and you know not really seeing yourself. For me, the very first book that I read in my freshman year of college was The Color Purple. That was like the first book that I really
Ah.
remember being by a Black woman author. So I get that. And, you know, a lot of times you done this was a women, you know, women in literature at the time, but it's like you didn't necessarily see your stories. It's not like it is now where our stories are all over the place, but at that time, you know, it was few and far between. So I could
Mm-hmm.
definitely relate to that, getting something that even if it's not specifically your story, you can relate to it because there's something in it that you can see yourself in
Yeah,
that.
you
So,
just recognize yourself in it.
right, exactly,
I mean,
exactly.
we have an endless capacity to empathize with people who are not us, right?
Absolutely.
So when you think about all the movies we watched growing up, if we weren't relating to the white male protagonist or the white woman protagonist, we wouldn't be watching the movie, right? And other groups can do that. They can also do that with characters who don't look like them, but society has not really pressed them to do that in a
Right.
significant way. As much as marginalized people, we're just expected to live in a world where we're not reflected, and that is, oh, that's okay, that's fine. But in fact, what we're discovering now is it's not okay, and it's
Right.
not fine, not just because it's exclusionary. I mean, that's one part of it, what my
Right.
parents were fighting against. But the other part is it's just boring. It's like, why just eat vanilla
Right,
when you
exactly.
could have all these other different flavors, you know? And for me
Absolutely,
as a horror
absolutely,
fan, there's nothing more exciting than watching a horror movie from another culture
absolutely.
and seeing how scares are different for them.
That's true. Well, speaking of that, let's get into the book itself because we're just talking, general terms here. But well, we'll have to say I really enjoyed the book. As I mentioned to you, I did some reading as well as listening. And for those of you who may not have read it yet, this is a re-release, and there is also an audio. The audio is new, correct?
Yes, brand new. I think that's how the release came up to be, because
Okay.
I mean, I want to say between us. I mean, we're not in a private forum, and I did have permission to say this one other time, so I'll say it now. The Between is actually in very, very early television development at a cable network, and I was working on a pilot. There are a lot of differences. I'm not going to go into it, but I was working on a pilot, and in order to reread a book that I wrote a long time ago, I
Mm-hmm.
prefer audio because
Okay.
that way I'm not fixated on, oh, why did I write that? Or like, that I'm missing a comma. It's like little stuff. It's
Mm-hmm.
very hard sometimes for authors to reread their books. So for me, just about the only way I re-experience my work is through audio. And there was no audiobook. So I
Right.
wrote to my agent, my former agent, who sold this book for me, and I said, "Hey, could you get in touch with the publisher and see if they could get an audiobook?" And I swear, the next thing I knew, there was like a whole big re-release coming.
Mm-hmm. And that's exciting because, one of the things is that there has been, for a lot of people, a resurgence, so to speak, with, Get Out and other things like
Oh,
that.
true.
So, this is a way of introducing your work to people who may not have been familiar with it. So I
Or
think
who
that's
weren't
awesome.
born when it came out.
Right, right, exactly,
you
exactly.
don't
So they
you don't
can,
need to
but
say
you
that
know
part.
what? I mean, well, of course, because a lot of times books are written in such a way where they go back in time. It still felt current, even though it was written, and originally in '95.
And isn't that sad? I mean,
Yeah.
when listening to it again, and I remember distinctly, and I hate to spoil it for people who haven't read it, but the central antagonist is a white supremacist terrorist. And I
Mm-hmm.
remember I gave him the three names, Charles Ray Good, because they all have to have three names, like Lee Harvey
Right.
Oswald. And at the time, I was a little bit worried that might be over the top, that might not
Mm-hmm.
be believable. Can you imagine? But in
Wow.
the 90s, it was, I mean, there were things going on. There was an AIDS epidemic. This is the Clinton era, but much as under Obama, I think there was this sort of hypnotic sense. Some people had, not everyone, that things had changed, right?
Mm-hmm.
I know very distinctly, as someone who doesn't remember seeing a white only or colored sign that had
Mm-hmm.
characterized my parents' upbringing, I
Right.
felt like a page had just turned, right? I'm Generation
Mm-hmm.
X. So we were the generation where all the recruiters were coming to college trying to hire Black workers. You could see yourself reflected on in the doll store, and all that. I mean, just
Mm-hmm.
it seemed like we had gotten over. And I think a lot of people of my generation were kind of guilty of not continuing agitation because we had that feeling that it was over,
Right.
right? So when I was writing the Between, the idea of a white supremacist terrorist seemed
Right.
pretty like big. I was like, wow, that's a stretch.
Nope.
Yes, it's just not. It's not funny, but
Right.
It's not a
Right.
stretch at all. And I knew pretty quickly after that, after the whole Oklahoma City bombing, it's like,
Mm-hmm.
no, it's not a stretch. It's really not a stretch at
Mm-hmm.
all. And in 2021, it seems like even less of a stretch
Right.
than it did when we created it. And that was one of the things in sort of revising this pilot we're working on, because somehow some of that racism had been leached out of the notes, the threats that the
Mm-hmm.
family was getting.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm like, hold on, no, that's a big part of the whole point, was
Mm-hmm.
that the form that this entity was taking was like racism as the monster, sort of in the
Right.
mold of Jordan Peele's Get Out. Not all black horror is that,
Right.
but definitely The Between was written as one of those books where racism is the monster. So let's lean back into that. Let's lean back
Mm-hmm.
in.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. So, do you have something that you want to share just to give us a little taste of what the book is about?
Uh, well, since you asked so nicely.
Thank you.
Yeah, it's just, I don't want to give your readers, let me put my reading glasses on. I don't want to give your readers who might not have finished it yet the wrong idea. Like this is some kind of slasher novel. Someone had me on a show and turned me to a page where I was reading one of the dreams that Hilton had, and it was like way over the top. I
Yeah.
was like, I don't know if that's the best.
Right. Yeah, because I mean, it really isn't that a slasher novel. So,
So, 6, 8. Yeah, sorry, my son is asking me a question. So I'm going to start with something that I think is a tone setter, and this is something that I also added to the pilot script. Who knows if it'll make it? I have these
we will
epigraphs.
pray that it does.
I have these epigraphs at the beginning of sections, right?
Mm-hmm.
And one of them was a poem by a Ghanaian poet named Abina P.A. Busia. And forgive me, anyone who's Ghanaian if I'm pronouncing her name wrong. And I think it encapsulates what this book is trying to capture for me. It's called Exiles.
Oh.
Funerals are important. Away from home, we cannot lay our dead to rest, for we alone have given them no fitting burial. Self-conscious of our absence, brooding over distances in Western lands, we must rehearse the planned performances of our rites till we return. And meanwhile, through the years, our unburied dead eat with us, follow behind through bedroom doors. And that's the poem. A lot of my epigraphs are themed around death, because the whole novel is basically about running away from death and what happens when
Right.
death catches you. And that was one of the quotes to kind of set it up. And I think, not to be too long with the reading, I'll read maybe the end of the prologue. How about this?
Okay.
Because the prologue, I have a fear of water, beaches, drowning. I grew up in
Okay.
Miami. I've had some bad experiences at the beach. It's untamed, it's
Right.
unpredictable. So you
Right.
don't know when these undertows will come. And sure enough, I have my 7-year-old character, Hilton, getting caught in an undertow, and it's his grandmother who saves his life. And this is that moment when she's in the water, or about to get in the water. He didn't hear Nana shout out from where she stood at the shore, but he'd hear the story told many times later. There was no lifeguard that day, but there were plenty of Kelly and James men who followed Nana, who stripped herself of her dress and ran into the water. The woman hadn't been swimming in years, but her limbs didn't fail her this one time. She needed to glide across the water. The men followed the old woman into the sea. Hilton felt he couldn't hold his breath anymore, and the water mocked him all around. It filled his ears, his nose, and finally his mouth, and his muscles began to fail him. It was then, just as he believed his entire 50-pound body would fill with water, that he felt an arm around his waist. He fought the arm at first, thinking it was another current, but the grip was firm and pulled him up, 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 until he could see light and Nana's weary, determined face. That was all he saw, because he went limp then. He would hear the rest from others who told him in gentle ways about chariots to the everlasting and that sort of thing. One of the James men had been swimming closely behind Nana, and she passed Hilton to his arms. Then she simply stopped swimming, they said. Said maybe she just gave out. Nana's head began to sink below the water, and just as one of the Kelly men reached to try to take her arm, the current she'd pulled Hilton from took her instead. The man carrying Hilton could only swim against it with all his might toward the shore. Many people almost drowned that day. When Hilton's senses came back to him and he was lying on the beach, caked in gritty sand, all that was left of Nana was her good flowered dress, damp and crumpled at the water's edge. So, what the gifted old folks, the seers, often say is true. Sometimes the dead go unburied.
Mm. Yes,
So, there
yes,
you are.
yes. That's a good
Check these out.
introduction to what the story is actually about. And well, I mean, there are just so many things about the story. I mean, the between, you don't tell what the between is right away in the story, but I kind of had an idea what it was.
Some people never know what it is.
Wow, really?
So let me start with that. Let me start with what is the between.
Yes.
It's what happens. This is fiction. Okay, it's a
Right.
state of being between different realities. Okay,
Mhm.
so the premise of this novel is if you cheat death, like Hilton did, he was supposed to die that day, and he didn't.
Right.
His grandmother helped him cheat death. If you cheat death, death is always trying to reclaim you. It's kind of like the Final Destination franchise, which I will point out came out after the Between, but I
Okay.
won't dwell there. There's nothing new under the sun, as they say. But so what happens when you're in that state is he had terrible nightmares, and those nightmares, as one of the quotes is, the nightmares come when you remember you're dead, basically, is the
Mhm.
quote. So all these nightmares are basically, they're scary, they're hints of that killer who's chasing his family, but also they're mostly just evidence, something's wrong. You are between realities, and then if you wake up, you're not in quite the same reality that you left behind. So if you fell asleep
Right.
and you were wearing a blue shirt, you would wake up and you're wearing a purple shirt. And it's like little things out of place. I mean, for the most part, some pretty big things, but
Right.
usually little things, so that you might tell yourself it's just your imagination. Your friends are going to gaslight you and tell you, "Oh no, what are you talking about? I wasn't wearing a Mets cap." It's like, but he was
Mhm.
wearing a Mets cap before I dozed off and
Right.
went to sleep, and then I wake up and you're not wearing the Mets cap anymore. So that's the hint that something's wrong. So
Mhm.
Hilton basically has to A, figure out what is wrong with him. Is he mentally ill? Does he have schizophrenia? What is going on? But also, how does he stop this terrorist who is threatening his family? Because he has a very deep sense of precognition that
Mhm.
these threats are real and his
Mhm.
family is in danger, and he has to act.
Absolutely, absolutely. Yes, and that was just something to see that, because at first when you're listening or reading, it's kind of like, okay, what's happening? Wait, didn't I just read that? What's going on?
Right, exactly.
So yeah, you really have to pay attention, have your ears open, or sometimes you might have to go back. Wait a minute. Oh, okay, it was meant to be that way.
Exactly. I did. I like, right. There's like literally a conversation, like one the moment before he has a breakdown with his son.
Right.
And you can't blame the wife. I mean, the wife, Dade, does try to be supportive.
Mm-hmm.
But at a
Absolutely.
certain point, he is really seeming unhinged.
Absolutely.
And
Absolutely.
so, like, especially like he has a moment with his son where his son is just feeding their pets,
Mm-hmm.
and he's waking up from a nap, and he just had this moment, like he's in the between again, and his son walks in and is saying the exact same thing. So he's like holding his son's cheeks. Is this real? Are you real? I mean, well, imagine
Right.
how frightening that would be for a child. And
Absolutely.
I would have thrown his
Absolutely.
butt out too, honestly, if that were my son. So you need to
Yes.
get some help. I love you. You need to stay like in your own space for a while we figure this out from a distance.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And that's just one of the things, like with his wife, Day Day. I mean, it's the story, and you kind of have to read it, but when you first start, you might think it's these things are happening for one reason, but really there's a lot more going on beneath the surface. The Day Day, the wife in the story, she is a newly elected judge. And,
Yes.
many times when, we get elected or even going through the process of getting into office. There are going to be people who don't like us or don't want us to be where we are. And
Sure.
so some of the things that may happen, you kind of expect that. But in this particular case, they are getting these very threatening letters from, you already mentioned his name, Charles Ray Good,
Yes.
who is like, he's, and they're like, well, why is he doing this? It's more or less because he doesn't like Black people more so than anything that she
Yeah,
did to
he
him.
doesn't like Black people, and he's getting hints in his dreams. He's basically being used as an agent
Mm-hmm.
of death
Mm-hmm.
to
Yes,
resolve itself. Like, I guess the
absolutely.
premise would be kind of death doesn't like loose ends.
Right.
So, and that was something that we kind of had to change a bit in trying to formulate. And I'm working with Steve, on the adaptation too. And
Okay.
again, I have to say, I have no idea how far this will go or if it will ever get to air with this
Mm-hmm.
particular, because you never know. But
Right.
we couldn't just make Death the ultimate antagonist because it's not solid enough. You need a
Mm-hmm.
face, and Charles Ray Good, who does appear in the pilot, at least thus far, is the lowest person on the totem pole. Right?
Mm-hmm.
He's not like what they call the big bad in Hollywood, is the big villain, the big antagonist. So we've actually created a more human big bad. This is
Okay.
one of those things you have to do in adaptation, because it's a tough thing to explain. Just the premise of the story is tough to explain, and you have to
Mm-hmm.
make it both understandable to the audience and compelling to the audience. And Final Destination has already been done, so
Mm-hmm.
even though this came out first, it doesn't matter. I can't just have Death trying to catch him like Final
Right.
Destination does. We had to create a different thing.
Okay. Okay. Well, then that makes a lot of sense because you do want to, as I say, make it understandable, make it that people will, can get into it and understand what's going on, or at least kind of sort of understand what's going on. And I say what they say, make it make sense
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
when someone's watching it in a television format. That's why I do asked to read the book, because we always know that when adaptations come out, it's going to be a little bit different.
Oh,
So
it's a little bit different, all right.
yeah,
I mean,
yes,
people will recognize it, but also you'll at least as the way we're talking about it now, it has some pretty major differences that we hope will work and make it more contemporary.
absolutely. Well, one of the things that I also, just with all of this going on, one of the things I also enjoyed about the book is that because it takes place in Miami, that you incorporate some of the things of what Miami is all about, whether it be, people of different cultures and things like that, and how all those cultures kind of come together and have a melting pot there in the
Yes.
Miami area, with a Ghanaian wife, and I believe at certain points they have some like Nigerian friends, and
Hmm.
their therapist is
Puerto
Puerto
Rican and
Rican, and so I like the fact that you included that as well, because that's the reality of that, and it makes it feel more real and more true to the location. How important was it for you to do that in writing this particular story?
well, they say write what you
Mm.
know, and since I was coming out of this long hibernation where I was
Mm-hmm.
writing what I thought I was supposed to be writing instead of what I actually knew, what I
Mm-hmm.
actually had experienced, I just basically ripped off everything I could think of from my life, like
Mm-hmm.
my experience as a young person with my parents integrating newly integrated neighborhoods,
Mm-hmm.
some of that's in there. You're not quite feeling safe in time inside your own home all the time. My
Mm-hmm.
father did get a call from the FBI warning him that he might be targeted by a mail bomber
Oh, wow.
when I
Okay.
was in high school, because there had been a spate of bombings, and he was a civil rights attorney, so he was on the list, and they just called. So that left an impression.
Right.
Um, just you name it, I threw it in there. My experiences as a Miami Herald reporter had
Mm-hmm.
brought me into contact with a lot of different kinds of people in Miami. I really did enjoy that eclectic life of,
Mm-hmm.
Celia Cruz is in there from the
Mm-hmm.
salsa music,
Mm-hmm.
which I grew to love. I had a Puerto Rican boyfriend who taught me how to dance to salsa music. So that was life changing. I feel like that was the whole purpose of that relationship, was to give me this music that I didn't know. Um, and on and on and on, just everything I could think of. And it was very important to me, but mostly just because after so many years of trying to sort of mold myself into a writer who was following canon and doing what others had done, I just sort of threw caution to the wind with the between. And I was like, well, what do you want to write? What story do you want to tell? Who are you? Just because you've never seen suburban Black people in fiction, which I think is almost literally true. I can't think of a book I had read about Black people in the suburbs. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, yeah, that's true.
And
That's
the only reason that matters is even when I tried to so-called write Black, I was writing, like in college, I tried a story about inner city kids, and it was a decent story, but ultimately I couldn't expand it beyond 90 pages because it wasn't my experience. I felt like a fraud. I would have, I would have needed to do some more research and know some more people. I couldn't do that. I couldn't do the rural experience of so many writers I loved, like Toni Morrison and Alice Walker. That wasn't my life either. So that I think that's part of the reason I started just writing white characters, was because I didn't see anything about like moving into a newly integrated suburb in fiction. I didn't know we were allowed to write about that. So yeah, Write What You Know became very liberating, and it became very important once I realized what I was doing.
Right. And in that, it's specifically about the Miami area, because of course, in this book, we are dealing with, things that would be considered supernatural and all of that. You also speak to the fact that you have people there that come from different, even religious or spiritual backgrounds as well, which I thought was also important, because you talk about, there's a piece about Christianity, but then there's a piece about other ways of
Vodou, Santeria, right? All of these systems that came out of West African religious practices, moving to our shores. And I'm in retrospect, I'm glad that I did not use like Vodou or voodoo as like an evil thing in the story. It was more someone who had experience with that and was using it as a way to interpret what had happened to her. Her character, I think her name was Marguerite. So she had come from a tradition where, yeah, there were some explanations for what was happening. She didn't have to like completely come out of left field, try to figure out, is there another realm? There is another realm, actually, according to, whatever your beliefs are. And that, yes, it was important for me to try to be inclusive in that way, so that if someone was from Miami, they would recognize Miami. Because, sometimes if you're watching TV or even probably reading a novel that's supposed to be set in Miami, it doesn't feel like Miami. Like Seinfeld doesn't feel like New York. You know what I mean? It's like, that's not the New York a lot of us know. So I wanted it to be the Miami that my readers would know.
Right. Oh, yeah. I'm thinking, like you said, like Friends, well, it's all, you never see any people of any type of culture or very rarely. One pops up every now and again. And I mean, we know that there might be some neighborhoods where it might be more predominantly one thing or another, but that you never see.
For the whole show, like the whole time?
Yeah. Like, nah, that's not really true. And, and to be honest, that was just the fact that you did include those cultural aspects and spiritual aspects. That was another thing that made it feel more current for me as a reader, because we know that now in the 2020s that people are beginning to look more at other ways of, belief systems, or maybe in some ways combining things, understanding that we do have these rich cultural heritages that we can learn things from and glean things from. And it might be a mixture of things, just because culturally, there are things that we may not have known before. And some things, quite honestly, have always been a part of the way we do things, and we just might not have understood where it really came from.
Exactly.
And now we're beginning to get that understanding. So I thought that was pretty cool to see that there. Yes. So wow, I'm just trying to think, because the book is so rich and so layered. Of course, one of the main themes, of course, with Hilton is the fact that he is there to protect his family. That's one of the things that he's there to do. And he's taking all, sorts of steps to try to do that in the midst of everything that's going on with him personally. And I
Yes,
thought that
even
was
while he's suffering, he's
right.
really thinking of his family first. And I have to say, I have kind of mixed feelings about how the book ends because I know that I wrote it specifically so that a character could go through a journey and not be afraid of dying. That was
Mm-hmm.
very important to me. As someone who is afraid of dying, in
Mm-hmm.
particular, myself.
Right.
I'm always looking for strength from my characters, right? And it's
Mm-hmm.
not a coincidence. My next book was about an immortal. So
Okay.
my immortal character can't die or doesn't die.
Right.
And it's like, oh, look how horrible this is. He loses everybody and he outlives everybody. Oh, that would be terrible if we live forever. It's always trying to brainwash myself to feel
Mm-hmm.
more peace about mortality. So that, I really meant the ending to be triumphant, that someone who had been running away from death his whole life, fearful of death, besought by nightmares his whole life, finally has this moment of acceptance. And the way he was able to gain that feeling of acceptance was feeling he was protecting his family,
Mm-hmm.
and even more specifically, protecting his daughter, because his daughter
Yes.
could grow up to be a great researcher, a great scientist.
Mm-hmm.
And I think we all look for that, right? We all look for, how have we mattered? What
Absolutely.
legacy have we set forth? And
Absolutely.
that's as it should be, right? That's what, how,
Mm-hmm.
because and often it's the difference between feeling at peace and not feeling at peace,
Mm-hmm.
when that time comes. So I meant it to be triumphant, but it's pretty harsh. It's pretty harsh. And and yeah, that's all I'm going to say about that. But that was the whole point of it, was
Right.
that do not be afraid of death. Do not, how do we embrace death? What's scarier than death? And I think
Mm-hmm.
my answer was, well, these nightmares, someone you trying to
Right.
threaten the people you care about. And if you can be away from those things, if your family is safe and you can have some rest, is that so bad?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Absolutely, absolutely. But I did really think, though, even though the ending might not have been, how do I put it, a happy ending per se.
Upbeat.
It wasn't a happy ending, but I do feel it was positive, and it was a positive in the fact of what you just said. That he was able to come to some certain realities, and make sure that his family was going to be okay, and things like.
Yes. That was the
Mm-hmm.
idea. So I hope that lands, but it's one of the harsher. I mean, I have some other harsh endings too. My Soul to Keep has a pretty harsh moment, but yeah, it is a pretty harsh ending because of the purpose of the whole book. I wasn't writing it intending that he would be able to win everything and keep everything. It was, the point was, how do you face death on your own terms and with strength and with courage?
Mm-hmm, absolutely. Oh, we've got looks like we got a super fan in the room. Let's see what Diane Poole. What is she saying here? Making sure it pops up.
Oh, look at
OMG.
this.
Tananarive Due, my favorite author. All right. I read the book series My Soul
Thank
to
you.
Keep and have turned the books on to others to read, which they love. She writes so great that I felt like I was there. She is an absolutely awesome writer. So thank you for your comment, Diane.
Yeah, thank you. That's great. I saw that. I think I met you, haven't I, Diane? Are you from Miami? That name is so familiar.
Yeah, so that's good. That's good. So well, just without, we're not going to give away all of the story. I would just suggest for those of you who have not had a chance to read, ooh, got upside down, The Between. Please either get the audio, which I truly enjoyed, or have an opportunity to pick it up and read it as well. Diane, I guess she didn't meet you, is what
Oh,
she said.
okay. Well, the name is so familiar.
So, well, just not really shifting gears, but just kind of continuing on. So, what are your thoughts about the fact that nowadays we are seeing a lot more stories and things like that in the horror genre that feature African Americans or Africans, people of African descent?
Well, it's a dream come true. For a horror fan like my mother, she had to watch movie after movie after movie that was not about Blackness in any way, shape, or form, or if it was in a very derogatory and stereotypical way. Like the
Mm-hmm.
Black character has to die, you know, protecting the
Right.
white characters and all this kind of thing. So I often, well, there are many, many reasons I wish my mother had lived, obviously, but she would have been really excited for this new era. She would have loved Get Out.
Mm-hmm.
Um, she would have loved to see the adaptations, my first two adaptations, you know, that I didn't make myself. I want to point out because we did produce a little short film in 2013 where we
Gotcha.
talked about Black horror, and there's this subgenre, you know, trying to, and we
Mm-hmm.
crowdfunded and we made our little film. But it really wasn't until 2017 and Get Out that the world seemed to figure out that there's a such thing as Black horror. And
Absolutely.
Jordan, yeah, right. And Jordan Peele's movie has had a tremendous impact. It's not
Mm.
the only thing, but it's like the first major turning point
Right.
I can
Right.
point to where if we're in a Hollywood room pitching a story where we literally might have had someone say to us, "Do the characters have to be Black?" Like out loud, out
Wow.
loud. And that not the first time. Okay. That happened more than once. To now, I mean, they may not buy it. They
Right.
still may not buy it, but at least there isn't that automatic, this would be great, but do the characters have to be Black? Because there's a wider understanding that Black horror is its own subgenre. And even
Mm-hmm.
if racism isn't the monster, a
Right.
story told from a Black perspective is just, as the kids say, going to hit different. It's going to hit a
Right.
little bit different. And that's the novelty factor that you want in horror, because it's not
Mm-hmm.
interesting to watch the same old reheated mythologies, the same
Mm-hmm.
old reheated tropes.
Right.
Um, and that's why I'm super excited about Horror Noir, which is on Shudder. I know not everybody has it. It is a paid streaming service, although they do have a 7-day trial.
Okay.
So in that free
And that
7-day
Shutter.
trial, Flutter.com, in that free 7-day trial, you could watch Horror Noir, A History of Black Horror, which is the documentary I executive produced where it talks about that
Mm-hmm.
history of Blackness and horror, some favorite films and some that
Mm-hmm.
didn't do what they were supposed to do. And then the new one, which just came out last month, is 6 short horror stories
Okay.
that are all different. You know,
Okay.
Steve and I wrote 2 of them. We wrote The Lake, which is an adaptation of one of my short stories, and
Mm-hmm.
one called Fugue State, which is something that Steve and I wrote together. But the other ones are just all over the place. Some of them are more like racism is the monster. One of them
Mm-hmm.
in particular is funny. Some of them are just the characters happen to be Black. And it's
Mm-hmm.
about us grappling with the things, because we don't spend all day thinking about whiteness and white. It's like, okay,
No.
what about the monster within?
Right.
How do you grapple with your fears of parenthood? It's just like all that, but
Wow.
with Black creators, Black directors, Black producers. And I'm really, really looking forward to more of that, because it's never been a situation where I wanted to be like, well, I'm the Black horror writer and I need to be the Black horror writer. I always knew that we needed a community. I mean, even in
Mhm.
Afrofuturism and science fiction, for a
Right.
while after Octavia Butler passed away, it just felt like everyone was splintered
Mhm.
and struggling on their own for a while. And then it kind of reconstituted, and you have this huge movement called Afrofuturism. Now, I couldn't even have room if I wanted to have a panel with like all the top
Oh,
Afrofuturism writers
yes,
and
yes.
too
And a
many
lot of
people on the
them,
stage.
right, and a lot of them are young adult I have seen, which is really great because, just like we were talking about not being exposed to certain things, even in a college level, we really didn't have stuff for us when we were younger. So I think it's great that we can see, that go across both the young adult and for adults to be able to look at ourselves in different ways and see see those stories and be the hero.
Yes, be
The
that it's.
hero
I mean,
a
it's
lot
such a
more
little.
often.
It's a little thing, but it's not a little thing. It is not a little thing at all to see yourself as the hero or heroine of a story.
Mhm,
And I think, like
mhm,
me, a lot of us start out naturally imagining us as ourselves as I would write stories about a Black girl trying to get in the Guinness Book of World Records or sneaking
mhm,
onto a spaceship. It wasn't anything to me. I would draw little pictures and color the skin
mhm,
Black. It took getting that taught out of me
mhm,
to
mhm,
lose track of who the heroine of the story was supposed to be. And so many writers I admire, whether it's Octavia Butler or Toni Morrison, simply were writing themselves. They were writing the books they wanted to read. They were writing the stories they wanted to be told, and not having to cater
Mm-hmm.
to any audience except the audience that's looking for that story, right? And
Absolutely.
it's not that excludes anybody. It's
Right.
thrilling and exciting for anybody to read an Octavia Butler novel. And how tragic would it have been if Octavia had thought she had to write white characters to get published, which
Right.
she probably
Absolutely.
did think sometimes, but she was not about to do it. And
Right.
and for a long
Absolutely.
time, she didn't have any money. And she really struggled for a long time, probably because she wasn't going to play those games.
Mm-hmm. She remained true to what was in her
Yes.
heart. Absolutely. Now, I just wanted to backtrack a little bit. You said that Shudder, Shudder.
.com,
Oh,
Shudder.com is
okay,
the
I'm gonna put
network that
that in the
has horror
comments.
noir. And
Okay.
I believe they still have that 7-day trial. So in that 7 days, you can watch both of those horror noirs and a whole bunch of other great horror. I love horror, so I'm always on Shudder.
Okay. Well, that's good to know. So I'll just put that up for those of
Oh, there
y'all
you go. Boom.
to see that and be able to go there, and hopefully there is a free trial still, but if not,
I
if
hope
you are, if
so.
this is something that you're into, please do, because the thing of it is, like with anything else, the more we support it, the more people are going to be willing to,
That's true.
bring on more creatives who can, do the work that we are looking for,
Yeah,
absolutely.
those who are
That
able to
those
support it. We definitely
absolutely.
appreciate the support.
Absolutely, absolutely. So along those lines, since this is something that you are well known as a person who's written in this genre for a long time, do you have any thoughts or ideas for people who might be looking to get into writing either speculative fiction or horror?
Never been a better time will be the first thing I would say. And the advice I'll give to anyone who's listening who is a writer who wants to know how to break in. I mean, it's kind of the long way around, but I think especially new writers start with short stories. And something like horror noir is a great example of how a short story can have a life beyond just, the digital publication and maybe if you're lucky $400 that you get paid to write a short story.
Mm-hmm.
Short stories can be adapted too. Short stories can be adapted as whole feature movies. You
Right.
just add a little bit more to it. So
Mm-hmm.
don't write off the short story. I think a lot of writers rush to the feature length script or rush to the novel before they've
Mm-hmm.
mastered storytelling, beginning, middle, and end. How do I create a realistic character? That was the thing that drew me to Stephen King. And I
Mm-hmm.
think draws a lot of people to Stephen King, whether or not they're horror fans, because a lot of Stephen King readers probably couldn't name 5 other horror writers. They're Stephen
Mm-hmm.
King fans. And the reason they're
Right.
Stephen King fans is because of his characters. And if you
Mm-hmm.
put characters you care about into these crazy situations, whether it's a rabid dog or a cat that came back from the cemetery or whatever the story is, you
Mm-hmm.
are stuck because you believe in that family, you believe in those characters, and if you say so, they have to buy it. The other thing is, especially for people who want to write science fiction per se, do your science research.
Mm-hmm.
Don't just make it up. Fantasy is more just making it up. It's imaginary creatures and imaginary places. But science fiction does have sort of this baseline requirement that it's grounded in actual possibility science, right?
Okay.
You can't pretend gravity doesn't exist if you're writing about space travel. It's just and there are plenty of other writers who have tackled these subjects before you and also research they have looked at. So there's libraries of stuff if you want to do that research. I'm not saying don't write science fiction, but if you're going to write science fiction, really bring it. Think like Octavia was a meticulous researcher.
Mm-hmm.
Her house was just lined with books. That was how she spent her time reading,
Mm-hmm.
preparing, observing the world. That's why she seemed like such a prophetess because she was paying attention.
Right.
So there's that. And aside from that, just I would say the most important thing is to find readers you trust who can bring you to that next level.
Mm-hmm.
I can't even think of a writer who just came out the box and every draft is like a final draft. Yeah,
Mm-hmm.
whether it's very, very successful television writers, they all have their bad drafts.
Right.
So you need to give yourself permission to write the bad draft. It's a bad draft when you're writing it, write it anyway. Give yourself permission to write the bad draft, fix it as much as you can, but then finding that reader who's not your mother, who's not your spouse, someone who will tell you the truth because they can see the truth.
Right. Right.
Everything you touch is not magical. What is wrong with this? Why is this not working? What would you do differently? And you may go through draft after draft, and that's okay. That's the process. You may get rejection after rejection. In fact, that is more than okay. That means you're trying to get it out there. That means it's only a matter of time before you're going to sell something. Absolutely. The time you need to worry is when you're not getting rejections, because that means you're not even submitting.
That's real talk. That's real talk.
I mean, it just is. It is what it is. Rejections suck. I got one even, I want to call it 2 years ago. I tried to write a short story, and it was science fiction. So when I talk about that research piece, I'm kind of talking to myself. I don't write that much science fiction. I call it a spoonful of science lets the medicine go down. And I had made some assumptions about space travel based on watching TV and movies. They just aren't real. They're not true. I had not done my research. And my editor was confused by my story for that and other reasons. And when I went back to that story a couple years later, I kind of licked my wounds and I didn't submit it to her again, but I had another opportunity to submit to an African/African-American speculative fiction anthology, because that's very exciting. It's all the African writers who are getting into speculative fiction, African futurism, right? So instead of setting my story in space, where I was fumbling around in the dark and I would have had to do a lot more research, I said, what if you set it on a cruise ship? An earthbound cruise, same story, but instead of on a spacecraft, it's on a cruise ship, because I know something about cruises. I've been on cruises. I know how the ocean works. You know what I mean?
Right. Exactly. Right. What you know?
Was like a light bulb when it was like, so sometimes you're biting off too much. One of my novels that I never finished before I started writing The Between, when I was still writing white characters, I like the title. It was called Separate and Related. It's a decent title, but it was about, now get what this was about. It was about a gay white male playwright who lives in New York and learns he has leukemia and takes that as an opportunity to get to know his brother better. Now, a few things going on here. That's an epiphany story. It had no genre in it. It's not, it's just contemporary realism, character development, nothing wrong with that. But as we've seen, that was not me. That was not anywhere near me in terms of just what the story was about. Now let's look at the characters. I have never in my life, I lived in New York for a summer after I was working on that book, but I had never lived in New York when I started writing it. Why I chose a character who was living in New York, I cannot tell you. A playwright, also never been a playwright, and didn't know anything at all about how being a playwright worked in the real world. And then I was not a gay white male, and I've never had a brother. There was literally no sign of me in my own novel. So it's no wonder I stopped writing it after about 200 handwritten pages, because I just ran out of BS. I ran out of making it all up out of thin air. But what did happen is that for sentences or scenes at a time, I could see the professional writer emerging that I was going to become. Like, you could put them in a room and they would talk, and I felt like I was a spectator. They were coming to life. The characters, as little as I knew about them, were still starting to feel real. So I took all the nutrients I could out of that experience. And sure, you should experiment, and sure, you should write outside of your comfort zone. But I'm talking about, you're starting out and you want to really believe in yourself as a writer. Don't bite off something that's too ambitious because it's too long, or because it's too far outside of who you really are as a person and as a writer. What do you really want to write? Write that, especially when you're beginning. What difference does it make if you can sell it? Just first of all, find out who you are. What do you really want to be writing about?
And that's key right there, because I think that there are probably some people, I mean, like with a lot of other things, people will see, oh, this is hot right now, so I need to go and jump on this bandwagon, so let me go and do this. But if it's not something that, that you have just an innate passion about or knowledge of, it's going to make it more difficult. I mean, not that you
Yeah.
can't, but it's going to make something that's challenging even more so, because you have to overcome all these obstacles and barriers just to be able to, put it together.
Right. And I have a mentee. I'm mentoring some screenwriters, and one of the women I'm mentoring didn't have any TV experience at all, but this was back a long time ago, but she knew lawyering. She was a lawyer. And at the time, there was a lot of legal TV, and she got a job just based on her expertise, like knowing. So look at what you know. There's value in what you know. There's value in your experiences. So don't be afraid to use those experiences. Just like I couldn't see myself like a Black family in the suburbs. It's like, who wants to read that? Well, it turns out a lot of people do.
Right.
So see the value in your own experiences. And that's not to say don't mix it up or don't play what if games or write as a man if you're a woman, write as a woman if you're a man. I'm not, that's all skill. Sure, write all kinds of characters, write white characters too. It's just, I would say, do not limit yourself to characters who are not like
Right.
you, specifically because you think you won't be able to sell because of that. That is a bad reason not to be writing your truth.
Oh, that is really good. Thank you so much. If anybody has any last questions or comments before we get ready to go, because we're going to wrap it up here in a minute. Once again, Tananarive, I just thank you so much for being here. Because one of the things over the years, your Brown Girl Collective is actually 12 and a half years old, so been around for a while. And over the years, as what I've done is shared a lot of history about Black women. And your mom is come up lots, so and you as well. So it's nice to actually be able to meet you and celebrate you today and celebrate your work. And this was a first novel, but to me it didn't read like a first novel, so that part as well.
Well, I had been writing for a long time before I finally figured out who I was and what I was supposed to be writing, so thank you for that.
Yes, so it was very good. So I'm like, this was her first book.
That's because of the 200 pages of that other book I didn't finish.
Right. And now that I've read this one and I can still go to sleep tonight, I will definitely dig into more of some of the books that you've written. And speaking of which, we just got a comment. Thanks for a very enlightening, interesting discussion.
Thank you.
You're so very welcome. I know that you're working on some screenplays and different things like that. You've got the shows on the Shutter Network and all of that. Are there any new forthcoming books that we should be out on the lookout for, or any reissues or anything, just so we can know what to spend our good money on?
Well, one of my first new novels in many years will be next year, called The Reformatory. It's historical. It's set in 1950, also horror, with a 12-year-old and 17-year-old co-protagonists, because I like my youth narrators. There's something so resilient about children, when they face the uncanny. They don't have to go through as many hoops as we do as adults to try to talk ourselves out of what we're experiencing. They take what they're experiencing more at face value. And I think that makes them very good narrators, in horror especially. And aside from that, I saw someone mention, Diane mentioned that she thought My Soul to Keep was going to be a movie. Blair Underwood did get very, very, very close. It was set up at Fox Searchlight. Rick Famuyiwa, who has gone on to some fame since then, had written a couple of drafts, but it just never could. That one Black executive there just never could get it quite over the hump. And we're still working on that. We're still working on that. But I think the best form for My Soul to Keep right now would be a series.
Okay.
I mean, there are 4 books in that series already. So that story is very expansive, and it would be tough to... I think it'll be tough to contain it in one film, but we'll see. If I get the opportunity, I would love to.
All right, that sounds good, and we'll be on the lookout for The Reformatory as well.
Next fall.
Yes, next fall. So well, I know how to get to you, so we may see you again.
All right. Well, great.
Come back, because we love what you're doing, and like I said, one of the things is us being able to show that there are different genres, and that we have the ability to do whatever we want and write whatever we want. We're not limited to one type of book or writing or another. So I really appreciate having you here again, and
Thank
we look
you.
forward to seeing you at another point in time. And so I want to wish everyone, thanks for joining us. If you watch this on the replay, please drop that in there, drop something in the comments so that we know that you were here. And just to everyone, wishing you a great Thanksgiving holiday if you celebrate, or just the days off if nothing else.
The rest.
Yes, I know there are people who don't celebrate, but for those who do, I wish you, good times with your family. Oh, and one last thing, and I think I may have taken the book someplace else, but I do want to share what our next book is going to be. We will be back. Give me just a second here. Yeah, here we go. I got so much going on. We will be back on with the book club on December the 6th with All Her Little Secrets by Wanda M. Morris. So that's going to be our last book for the year. And then starting in 2022, the way things are lining up, I will be doing one of these every week. How about that?
Wow.
Instead of a couple times
a
a month,
reading.
a lot of reading, a lot of audio. A combination of both. So I'm looking forward to that. And so we will see you again on the 6th of December for All Her Little Secrets by Wanda M. Morris. So let me see. I think we have another comment. I'm not sure. Moving around here. Oh, talking about Thomas Blackshear. Okay. All right. Yes, absolutely. So thanks again, everyone, for your time. We look forward to seeing you again sometime soon. And Tananarive, thanks again. It's been a pleasure and an honor to speak to you.
Thank you. And thank you to everybody who was here.
All right. We'll chat again soon. Have a good
All
one.
right, great. All right. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.